Welcome. Today is the 29th of Sivan the 28th of Sivan. And the 4th of July. So congratulations if you're in the United States. And if you're French, you're going to have to wait another 10 days. So we're going to be looking at the fifth reading of Parshat Korach. And in this reading, Moses takes on sort of like providing some kind of additional proof that God has chosen the tribe of the Levites, and specifically Aaron, as his priesthood. And to do that, he has each of the tribes bring a staff, and all the staffs are placed. These are not like the vessels of incense that we saw in the previous readings, just a staff. And the staffs are placed in the sanctuary overnight, and in the morning they come and they realize that Aaron's staff has sprouted. It produced blossoms, brought forth sprouts, and borne almonds. Now, this word almonds is a little misleading, because in Hebrew the word for almond is really the form, meaning we're looking at a bud that has produced a blossom, and after the blossom falls off the branch, you get something that looks like an almond in almost all species of plants, and then that becomes the fruit. And that's the order of things. I don't know what this is called in English. In Hebrew, the name for this little bud that comes out, this round thing that is left after the flower falls, is called an almond. Now, the reason it's called an almond is because of its shape. It's usually shaped like an almond. But there's another reason for this, and that is because the sages explain that of all the plants, of all the fruit-bearing trees, it's the almond that sprouts and buds and produces fruit the quickest. And so one might say that this form was borrowed from the almond to designate any such beginning of a fruit on any type of fruit-bearing tree. But again, the idea here is that the almond is the quickest. Now, the other point is that the word shaked, almond, in Hebrew also means quickness. Ki shoked ani al dvari la'asato, as God says to Jeremiah in his first chapter, I'm quick to do what I've shown you. This word also means swiftness, alacrity. And so we have here a very interesting, let's call it a very interesting taxonomy that comes out of the way that things are in the Torah. So again, the whole point was that Aaron's staff was the first one, or it's shown brilliantly by sprouting and having flowers and putting out the almonds overnight. It showed that there was something special about Aaron's staff. It was something special. It was being a sign for God's having chosen the children of Aaron himself, for the priesthood. Another interesting point is that the priests are known for their quickness. They're also known for their swiftness. And by quickness, what do we mean exactly by quickness? It's not just how fast you perform your duties. Being quick is a sign of being nullified to the one commanding you. In other words, that when somebody is heavy-handed and of heavy heart and of heavy spirit, they move slowly, and they may function, they may do things, they may follow the instructions they've been given, but they do it very slowly. The fact that the priesthood demands quickness means that it also demands a nullified existence, one who is willing to take on the tasks placed upon him by God. And that's what you expect from a priest. You expect them to be quick. In other words, nullify to God. And all this came about in Aaron's staff. Now, the point here is that what we want to look at is the intersection between Torah and science. And why do we say this? Because the staff could have come out looking like any tree. It didn't have to look like an almond tree. I said that it's a little misleading because the word for almonds is really the word for any kind of the beginning of any kind of fruit on any kind of tree. But it was chosen because the almond is the quickest, and for its shape, but also because it's the quickest. And so in a certain sense, the almond is the king of trees when it comes to bearing fruit. It's the one that does it the best. So we have here the beginning of a topic that's very important, which is that when God performs a miracle, the miracle is better, let's say it that way, it's more pleasing, it's more natural if it's enclosed in natural tendencies that exist anyway in the world. In other words, a miracle doesn't have to be something that uproots nature. It can be something that works with nature, making things that are of one degree multiplied by many degrees, taking it up by a huge constant. So, in this case, what was needed was to show that Aaron's staff was special. And what God did was he turned it into an almond branch, which anyway is special, albeit not as special or not special enough to be able to sprout overnight. But still, there's a hint here to this whole notion that if you go and you research nature, you will find that there's something special about the almond tree. And this is something that the sages take up. And when they discuss this in the tractate of Eruvin, they give many, many examples of this. And it starts with the verse from Job 35:11. He teaches us, meaning God teaches us, from the beasts of the earth and makes us wise from the birds of the heavens. And the sages say like this: if the Torah had not been given, we would have learned modesty, meaning human conduct, moral human conduct. We would have learned modesty from the cat, not to steal from the ant, fidelity from the dove, and proper conduct from the rooster. In other words, the sages are saying, it's not that nature doesn't have the beginning of the moral stance that the Torah prescribes. It does. It's just that it's not enough for a human being. A human being needs to take this to a higher degree. But some of these basic moral conducts already can be found in the natural world. And in general, the natural world has Torah in it. And this is a little surprising at first to speak about it this way. But let's take a step back to understand why that's the case. We usually talk about the Torah being the supernal wisdom, the wisdom of God, God's mind. But God's mind also created the earth with all its hosts, meaning with all of nature. Originally even, we speak about the primordial Torah. The primordial Torah is not something that we have a separate text for. We don't hide it somewhere. The primordial Torah is like the understanding of the Torah text in a way that unifies all wisdom. Not just supernal wisdom, not just God's wisdom as He gave it at Mount Sinai, but human wisdom as well, mundane wisdom. What is mundane wisdom? That's us pursuing our knowledge of reality, our knowledge of nature. Today we call that science, which literally means to know. We want to know our surroundings. We want to know nature. This is separate from technology, although technology is one of the most important offshoots of knowing nature. But don't confuse it with technology. Technology is a whole different story in and of itself. We're talking here about knowing nature. So God's wisdom is both science and Torah, originally. We usually designate the second day of creation as the day on which this wisdom was split into two. And we call it the higher waters and the lower waters. The higher waters, water in general, is a symbol for wisdom. So the higher waters become the supernal wisdom, the wisdom of morality, the wisdom of human conduct, the wisdom of knowing the heavens. And the lower waters, underneath the firmament, become the mundane wisdom, the wisdom that went into nature, but is godly wisdom just as much. And so there is a whole tendency in Jewish thought to unify these two. And there have been all kinds of attempts. Let me just mention that George Sarton, who was probably one might say the godfather of history of science and philosophy of science as a discipline, as an academic discipline. He was the founder of the two famous academic journals on history of science, Isis and Osiris. He came to Jerusalem about 60 years ago, and they were celebrating I believe it was the 900th birthday of Maimonides, and he gave a very interesting lecture on the unification of Torah and science, and he called it in general of divine wisdom and mundane wisdom in Maimonides' writings. And he said that Maimonides has been and is still the first and last truly successful unification of divine and human wisdom together. Because what Maimonides did in his Guide to the Perplexed is, Moreh Nevuchim, is he took the ruling science of the time, which was Aristotelian science, and he completely unified it with Torah wisdom. It's a complete unification. It's beautiful. Of course, since then, science has changed tremendously. We don't hold by Aristotelian science today, although it has some stuff that is still used, but in principle, we don't use any of it. So we need a new unification today. And that's considered to be one of the tasks of the Mashiach, of the Messiah, to reunify the divine and mundane wisdom. We actually, the students of Rav Ginsburg and he himself, have written a number of books on this. The book that I had the good fortune to write with the Rav is called Wisdom, the Integration of Torah and Science, and you can find it on Amazon. And there's a much larger volume that was written in Hebrew by my friend Nir Menusi. So this is a very big topic. When you want to unify Torah and science, and now let's get to the point, so in any kind of unification, when there's one thing here and one thing here, you have to find a common ground in between. So if we have the Torah and we have science, the higher waters and the lower waters, so what we need to find is the common ground where they unify. So where they unify, we call this either the Torah in science or the science in Torah. There is a lot of science in Torah. The sages over the generations, and Maimonides, for instance, the sages were not so aware of Aristotelian science, but they were aware of it to some degree. But Maimonides was much more aware of it. So they integrated much of the science of their time into the Torah. They didn't integrate it in the sense of saying the science that is being discussed is necessarily true. They used it as a metaphor. They used it as a way of illustrating the Torah principles that they were dealing with. I do that many times when I'm teaching, especially if you follow our morning classes. So there's a lot of modern science that fits many of the ideas that we discuss in the inner dimension of Torah. Again, that doesn't mean that if we use it, that we're claiming that it's 100% true, because the only thing we know about science is that in 100 years, much of what we think today will probably be either discounted or marginalized, or sometimes turned into a subset of a larger theory. But still, science in Torah means that we do adopt many of the models that science teaches and is discovered and we currently think are true. We adopt it into understanding the Torah. And this exists at any age of Torah, especially in the Torah. Here we have the example of the alacrity of the almond being a topic that you could study, or what we quoted from Eruvin about the natural world harboring all these principles of morality in their behavior. And we also have the Torah in science. The Torah in science is a little less well known, but there are many principles in science that were discovered because people searched using the Torah. The most famous among these is probably Newton's work. Newton was a great believer in Jewish mysticism, and he wasn't a Christian mystic. He was literally studying mysticism in Hebrew. He was studying it in the original language. He wasn't just studying it from the Christian sources, which had many times misunderstood or mistranslated. And that's one of the reasons why he was able to come up with the idea of gravity as an occult force, meaning a force that you couldn't see. He just says, it's there, it's holding the solar system together. I can't tell you exactly what it is, because we can't measure it yet. We don't know yet how to describe it. In our times, we've already measured gravitational waves. We know that what Newton was referring to is a true, real force, but he couldn't yet describe it. But he had a belief in it because he says he believes in it from his study of Jewish mysticism. So when you really want to unify something together, you have to start from where they're unified anyway. The science and Torah, the Torah and science. The same goes when you want to unify two people. You have to find the feminine in the husband. You have to find the masculine in the wife. And this becomes the grounds for the unification. So what we have here in today's reading is an example of science in the Torah. That there's something special about the almond. We can study it, understand it as a case study of what it means to unify Torah and science. And in this case, probably the direction is looking at the shape of the budding fruit and understanding why it's quicker if it looks like an almond, why it's not as quick if it has a different shape, and so on. And there's actually, I know this sounds even, but you must believe me that everything's been studied, everything possible. There's actually a book that's called On Growth and Form. And this is a classic in the botany world. It's by D.W. Thompson. It was written in the 40s or 50s. I don't remember. I have a copy of it here in my library. And it is the Bible, one might say, of growth and form, and why things that have a certain shape either grow quickly or grow slowly. And there's a lot to be said there about the shape governing the speed of growth. There's a little bit of a shout out to, I don't know if this has affected him in any way. I have a nephew who's now doing his postdoctorate in California on almonds. He created a new species of almond that can grow in hot weather. Usually almonds need some chill in order to grow properly. And here in Israel that doesn't always happen. And so he developed a species of almond that can be grown even in the desert. And it works. So, hello, if you're listening to these classes. And thank you for joining. It's been a little longer today. A lot of topics. I hope that it sparks some thinking, some thought. And that you explore this further in our book and on inner.org, inner.org, where we have a lot of articles on Torah and science. And what we just discussed is in our weekly magazine, Wonders. You can always get it on our Patreon page, not my personal Patreon page, but rather Rav Ginsburg's, patreon.com/galeinai, GALEINAI. We don't distribute them anymore in the United States, though we used to. We kind of ran out of funding. But you can always download it. It's usually available Monday evenings, and print it out locally, or you can print it out as a print-friendly version on your printer at home. Thanks for joining. Hope to see you tomorrow. All the best.